Before you fall asleep, let yourself drift back in time to a quiet medieval village covered in snow, where life moved slowly and winter taught people how to wait. Tonight, you will rest there and simply listen. The winter did not arrive all at once. It came slowly, almost politely, as if asking permission before settling in dot at the edge of a small medieval village. The air grew colder each morning. Breaths became visible, pale and brief, disappearing as quickly as they formed. The sky, once wide and blue, softened into muted shades of gray. This village had no name that mattered anymore. It was one of many scattered across the countryside of medieval Europe, a place of wooden homes, stone paths, and quiet routines shaped by the seasons thawed as autumn faded. The days shortened. Sunlight lingered for a little less time each evening, and darkness arrived earlier, gently but firmly. People noticed it not through calendars or clocks, but through their bodies. Through stiff fingers at dawn, through the way the ground no longer warmed beneath their feet. The first frost appeared silently. It traced delicate patterns across fields and rooftops, turning grass white and brittle by morning. No one spoke of it much. They had seen this before. Winter was not a surprise. It was a visitor they knew well. In the early evenings, a bell rang from the small stone church at the center of the village. Its sound traveled slowly through the cold air, low and steady, reminding everyone that the day was ending. Doors were closed sooner now. Wooden shutters were pulled tight. Gaps in walls were stuffed with cloth and straw. Every small effort mattered. Inside the homes, life grew quieter. The outside world retreated behind thick walls and heavy doors, and attention turned inward. Fires were lit earlier each afternoon. The smell of burning wood filled the rooms, a scent both sharp and comforting. Flames flickered softly, casting long shadows that moved lazily across the walls. These fires were more than warmth. They were safety. They were light. They were the heart of each home. Families gathered close to the hearth. Benches were pulled nearer. Cloaks stayed wrapped around shoulders, even indoors. No one complained. The village animals sensed the change as well. Chickens were brought into shelters. Cows and goats were guided into barns thick with hay. Their breath rose in slow clouds as they settled in for the night. Children, once restless outdoors, now stayed close to home. They carried small bundles of sticks, their boots crunching softly over frozen ground. Their voices were quieter, their games slower. Above the village, the sky darkened earlier each day. Clouds moved low and heavy, promising snow that had not yet fallen. There was no fear in this waiting, only awareness. Winter meant stillness. Winter meant patience, and patience was something this village understood well. As night settled in, the sounds of the world softened. Wind moved through bare branches with a low whisper. The distant howl of something unseen echoed briefly, then faded. Inside one small home, a man added another log to the fire. The wood cracked gently as it caught flame. Sparks lifted upward, glowing briefly before disappearing. A woman nearby folded woolen cloth with slow, careful movements. Her hands were practiced, calm. Every fold was familiar. A child leaned against the wall, watching the firelight dance. His eyes grew heavy, though he tried to stay awake. There was comfort here, deep and steady. Outside, the village rested. No carts moved. No travelers passed through. The roads were quiet, empty, waiting. This was how winter began. Not with storms or sudden cold, but with silence, with shorter days, with softer sounds, with lives drawing inward. Each home became its own small world. Each fire, a tiny sun against the long night dot, and though no one could yet know how long this winter would last, they prepared in the only way they knew how, by slowing down Dot, by conserving warmth, by holding close to one another. The cold pressed gently against the walls, testing them, but inside there was light. Time itself seemed to move differently now. Moments stretched. Evenings lingered. The village slipped into a quieter rhythm, guided not by urgency, but by endurance. And as the fire burned low and steady, and the wind whispered outside, the long medieval winter began its patient watch, not as an enemy, not as a threat, but as a season to be lived through, one slow, silent day at a time. Winter did not allow for haste. Everything had to be done slowly, carefully, and with purpose. As the days continued to shorten, the village turned its attention to preparation. Not preparation filled with worry, but preparation shaped by habit. These people had learned over generations that winter favored those who moved early and punished those who rushed. Each morning began in quiet. The sky remained pale long after waking, and the ground stayed hard beneath worn boots. Men stepped outside wrapped in thick cloaks, their breath rising gently as they walked toward sheds and storehouses. Wooden doors creaked open, revealing stacks of grain, bundles of dried herbs, and barrels sealed weeks before. Nothing here was wasted. Nothing was taken for granted. Grain was checked carefully, hands running slowly through kernels of barley and rye. If moisture was found, it was dried again. If pests appeared, they were dealt with calmly. Nearby, strips of meat hung from beams, darkened and stiff from smoke and salt. They swayed slightly in the still air, a quiet promise of meals yet to come. Fish, preserved in barrels, rested beneath layers of coarse salt. Lids were lifted, inspected, then sealed once more with patient care. Women gathered indoors as much as possible now. Spinning wheels turned at an unhurried pace. Wool passed through fingers that knew its texture well. Needles moved in slow, practiced rhythms. Clothing was examined piece by piece. Small tiers were stitched closed. Edges were reinforced. Layers were added where cold would creep in. Children helped in simple ways. They carried light bundles of kindling, stacking them near doorways for easy reach. They fetched water while streams were still open, moving carefully across ground already edged with frost. No one scolded them for moving slowly. Speed had little value now. Outside the village, fields lay quiet. The soil, once turned and worked, now rested beneath a thin crust of ice. Fences were checked, posts straightened where the ground allowed. Livestock received special attention. Extra straw was brought into barns. Doors were reinforced to block the wind. Animals were brushed, fed, and spoken softly. They too would endure the winter, and their survival mattered deeply. At the center of the village, the communal storehouse remained closed most days. Its contents were not for daily use. They were for need, for storms, For weeks, when travel became impossible, the knowledge of its presence brought comfort. Even when its doors stayed shut, as afternoons faded into evening, preparation gave way to rest. Fires were lit earlier each day. The glow of hearths spread warmth through thick walls. Though the corners of rooms remained cool, meals were simple. Bread baked earlier in the week. Soup simmered slowly, filled with root vegetables and herbs. The smell of cooking drifted through small homes, wrapping each room in quiet warmth. People ate without hurry. They spoke little. Words were saved for another time. After eating, hands returned to work. Wood was carved into tools. Baskets were woven. Nets were repaired for seasons yet to come. These tasks filled the long evenings, giving shape to hours that might otherwise feel endless. Candles burned low and steady. Their light softened faces, turned walls golden, and made the darkness outside feel distant. Beyond the windows, the wind moved slowly through bare branches. It carried no urgency, only presence as night deepened. Families gathered closer together. Benches shifted nearer to the fire. Cloaks were drawn tighter. The cold pressed gently, never forcing its way in, but always reminding them it was there. Preparation was not just physical. It was mental, emotional. By doing these small, familiar tasks, the villagers settled themselves for what lay ahead. They did not count days. They did not predict storms. They simply made ready. And in that readiness, there was calm. There was a quiet confidence, born not from certainty, but from experience. Winter would come fully soon. Snow would fall. Roads would vanish. But tonight, the work was done. The fire crackled softly. Hands grew still. Eyes grew heavy. And the village rested, prepared not for battle, but for patience. As the cold deepened outside, life moved inward. The medieval home became the center of everything. Not large, not grand, but steady and familiar. Most houses in the village were built of wood and stone. Their walls were thick enough to slow the wind, though not enough to stop it completely. Every small draft was known. Every creak understood. Floors were hard-packed earth or rough planks, worn smooth by many years of quiet footsteps. In the corners, shadows rested, undisturbed. At the heart of each home was the hearth. A simple structure of stone and clay, blackened by years of smoke. Above it, a narrow opening allowed smoke to escape, though much of it lingered inside. The air smelled of ash and wood, a scent that clung to clothing and hair. It was not unpleasant. It was familiar. The fire burned slowly. Not too high, not too low. Fuel was precious. Each log was placed with care. Flames moved gently, casting a warm, uneven light across the room. They softened the edges of things, making the world feel smaller, safer. Around the hearth, daily life unfolded. A bench leaned against the wall, its surface polished by time. A low table held simple tools, a wooden bowl, a cup worn thin at the rim. Animal skins and woven blankets were hung where needed, blocking the cold from creeping through cracks in the walls. These coverings shifted slightly as the fire warmed the room. Sleeping spaces were arranged close together. There was little separation. Privacy mattered less than warmth. Beds were simple straw mattresses covered with coarse cloth, layered with wool and fur. At night, Bodies rested side by side, sharing heat. There was comfort in this closeness, a sense of belonging that eased the long nights. During the day, movement was slow. No one hurried from one task to another. Each action flowed gently into the next. Someone stirred the fire. Someone folded cloth. Someone sat quietly, listening. Outside sounds faded behind thick walls. The world beyond the door felt distant, almost unreal. When the wind grew stronger, it pressed against the house, testing its strength. The walls held. Occasionally, snow tapped softly against the roof, a sound barely noticeable, like fingers brushing wood dot inside. Voices were kept low. Loud speech wasted energy. Silence, when shared, felt natural. Children learned to be still. They sat near the fire, watching the flames rise and fall. Their eyelids grew heavy, their thoughts drifting. Light came and went slowly. Morning arrived quietly, filtered through small windows covered in cloth or oiled parchment. The light was pale and gentle, never harsh. As evening returned, shadows stretched again, filling the corners with calm darkness. Meals were eaten close to the fire, hands wrapped around warm bowls. Steam rose slowly, carrying the scent of herbs and roots. There was no rush to finish. Time felt abundant, even when it was not. After eating, the room settled once more. Tools were set aside. Work faded into rest. The fire became the focus again. Its steady presence guided breathing, slowed thoughts. Outside, the village slept. Snow continued to fall, layer by layer, quietly changing the landscape. Paths disappeared. Sound softened. The world grew still. Inside the medieval home, warmth remained. People wrapped themselves in blankets, listening to the familiar noises of the house, the crackle of wood, the sigh of settling beams, the gentle breath of those nearby. Sleep came gradually, not forced, not sudden. Just a slow letting go. The home held them through the night, as it had held generations before, and as the fire dimmed to glowing embers, and the cold waited patiently outside. The long winter continued, one quiet night at a time. As winter settled fully around the village, time itself seemed to change. Days no longer rushed forward. They unfolded slowly, one quiet moment following another. Morning arrived without urgency. There was no sudden brightness, no sharp edge to the light. Instead, a soft gray glow seeped gently into the homes, signaling the start of another winter day. People woke when their bodies were ready. There were no clocks to follow, no bells demanding immediate movement. Only the quiet awareness that the fire needed tending. Someone rose from the bedding, moving carefully so as not to wake the others. Feet touched the cold floor briefly, then retreated toward the warmth of the hearth. The fire was stirred. Embers glowed softly, responding slowly as a new piece of wood was added. Flames returned, calm and steady. This small act marked the beginning of the day. Tasks were chosen gently. Nothing urgent. Nothing heavy. Winter was not a season for large ambitions. It was a season for maintenance, for repetition, for small, meaningful actions. Tools were picked up, then set down again. Hands worked slowly, guided more by habit than by thought. Someone repaired a strap on a warm bag. Someone sharpened a blade that would not be used for weeks. Someone simply sat, watching the fire, allowing the mind to rest. The absence of hurry felt natural now. Movement slowed not out of laziness, but out of wisdom. Energy was precious. It was saved carefully, like food or firewood. Outside, the village mirrored this stillness. No carts rolled through the streets. No loud voices echoed between houses. Even the animals moved less. They stood quietly in their shelters, chewing slowly, breathing evenly. Snow softened every sound. Footsteps became muted. The wind lost its sharpness. Within the homes, hours blended together. Morning, afternoon, and evening felt similar, distinguished only by the dimming light. Meals came without ceremony, not as events, but as gentle pauses in the day. Warm bowls were held close. Steam rose slowly, curling upward before fading. After eating, there was no rush to continue. People lingered near the fire, letting warmth spread through tired muscles. Conversation, when it happened, was quiet. Short sentences, familiar topics, often in silence, returned quickly, and no one felt the need to fill it. Children learned to occupy themselves quietly. They traced patterns in the dirt floor. They watched shadows move along the walls. Their thoughts drifted easily. As daylight faded once more. Lamps and candles were lit. Their flames barely moved, protected from drafts. The world beyond the walls seemed far away now. Winter had narrowed life's focus, bringing everything closer. Simpler. Night came early, and with it, rest. People wrapped themselves in layers of cloth and wool. They leaned back against walls or settled onto bedding, listening to the familiar sounds of the home. The crackle of fire, the soft shift of someone turning, the quiet rhythm of shared breathing. Sleep did not arrive suddenly. It drifted in, slow and patient. Thoughts softened. Edges blurred. The mind followed the same path as the body, letting go, slowing down. And as the village rested together, day after day, the long winter continued its steady course. Not harsh, not dramatic. Just slow, quiet, enduring. Winter meals were never hurried. They were meant to warm, to sustain, and to calm. As the cold tightened its hold on the village, food became simpler. Not because there was less care, but because simplicity was enough. Each day, the preparation began quietly. No sharp sounds, no sudden movements. A pot was lifted and set gently near the fire. Water was added slowly, followed by familiar ingredients gathered weeks before. Root vegetables were common now. Turnips, carrots, onions stored in cool darkness. They were peeled carefully, cut into steady pieces, and dropped one by one into the pot. Grain followed. Barley or oats, measured not by weight, but by experience. A pinch of dried herbs was added last. Sage, thyme, leaves saved from warmer days. The soup simmered gently, not boiling, not rushed. Steam rose slowly, carrying a soft, earthy scent through the home. It mixed with the smell of wood smoke, creating a warmth that settled deep in the chest. Bread was sliced nearby, dark, dense loaves baked days earlier. Each piece firm, meant to be eaten slowly. Meals were taken close to the hearth. Hands wrapped around wooden bowls, feeling heat seep through fingers stiff from the cold. There was comfort in this routine. The same motions, the same flavors. Each spoonful was warm, steady, predictable. No one spoke much while eating. Conversation was not necessary. The meal itself was enough. Children ate quietly, their movements slower than in summer. They leaned close to the fire, cheeks flushed softly by its glow. After the bowls were emptied, no one rose immediately. The warmth lingered, and so did the moment. People sat, breathing evenly, allowing the food to settle, allowing the cold to remain outside. Sometimes a small treat appeared. A piece of dried apple, a spoon of honey saved for special days. These were not indulgences. They were reminders of abundance remembered, of spring yet to come. As evening deepened, another simple meal was prepared. Not different, just repeated. Repetition brought peace. The fire burned low and steady, lighting faces softly. Shadows moved slowly along the walls. Outside, the world was silent beneath snow. Inside, warmth remained. After eating, bowls were cleaned carefully. Water was precious. Nothing was wasted. Then the home returned to stillness. Bellies were full, not heavy. Comforted, not burdened. The body relaxed more easily now. Muscles loosened. Breathing slowed. Food, warmth, and quiet combined, guiding the mind toward rest. Winter meals did not excite the senses. They soothed them, and as night settled fully, and the fire dimmed to glowing embers, the simple nourishment of the day lingered steady, reassuring and enough. When night settled fully over the village, the fire became the center of everything. Flames moved slowly, rising and falling without urgency. They made no demands, only offered warmth and light. People gathered close, not because they were told to, but because it felt natural. Benches were pulled nearer. Blankets were drawn tighter. The cold outside faded into the background. It was during these quiet evenings that stories began to surface. Not dramatic stories. Not frightening ones. Just memories. Moments from long ago. Simple events softened by time. An older voice might speak first, low and steady. Words came slowly, with long pauses between sentences. Someone would mention a winter from years past, one much like this one. Snow deep and roads lost. Days spent waiting. No one interrupted. Listening was part of the ritual. The story did not follow a clear path. It wandered gently, moving from one small detail to another. A memory of a frozen stream. The sound of ice breaking in spring. The taste of the first fresh bread after winter ended. These details drifted through the room, mixing with the warmth of the fire, settling softly in the air. Children leaned against the walls, their eyes half closed. They listened without effort, letting the words wash over them. Even adults felt the pull of rest. Shoulders lowered. Breathing slowed. The fire crackled quietly, filling the spaces between sentences. Sometimes the story paused entirely. Silence took over, and no one rushed to break it. Silence here was comfortable. It belonged. When another voice joined in, it did so gently, adding a small detail, a familiar name, a remembered place. These stories were not meant to teach. They were not meant to impress. They were meant to pass time, to soften the edges of the long night. Outside, snow continued to fall, layer by layer, quietly reshaping the world. Inside, the fire burned lower. Its light grew softer, more golden and bright. The stories grew slower too. Words stretched. Sentences became shorter. Eventually, even the stories faded. Not with an ending, but with a natural pause. One by one, voices fell silent. Heads leaned back. Eyes closed. The fire remained, steady and patient. It did not need attention now. It simply burned, watching over the room. Breathing filled the space. Slow, even. The home rested and shared. Quiet. Stories lingered only as feelings now. Comfort. Familiarity. A sense of being held by the night. And as the fire settled into glowing embers, and the long winter night stretched on, sleep arrived gently. Without effort. Snow did not fall all at once. It arrived quietly, almost unnoticed at first. A few soft flakes drifted down from the sky. Moving slowly, as if taking their time, they settled on rooftops, on bare branches, on the silent ground. By morning, the village looked different. Familiar shapes were softened. Sharp edges disappeared. Paths that once guided daily movement were now hidden beneath a thin white layer. Footsteps left gentle impressions, quickly fading behind those who made them. Sound itself seemed to change. Snow absorbed it, wrapped it, held it close. The usual creaks and distant calls were muted, as if the world had chosen to whisper. Homes stood quietly, their roofs wearing a new weight. Smoke rose slowly from chimneys, dark against the pale sky. Inside, people noticed the difference immediately. The light felt softer. The air felt still. Windows revealed a world that had paused. Nothing moved quickly. Nothing demanded attention. When someone stepped outside, the cold felt deeper now. It pressed gently but firmly, reminding everyone to move with care. Breath rose in thicker clouds. Hands stayed tucked inside sleeves. Each step was measured. Snow reached the edges of doorways. It gathered in corners, against walls, along fences. Children watched from inside, their faces close to the small windows. The world beyond looked quiet and unreal, like a painting. No one rushed to clear paths. There was time. Winter had only begun. Inside the homes, life remained steady. Fires burned a little brighter now. Extra logs were added, not quickly, but with intention. The fire responded slowly, warming the room inch by inch. Meals tasted warmer against the cold outside. Bowls were held closer. Steam lingered longer. The contrast brought comfort. As snow continued to fall, the village grew smaller. The horizon faded. Distance disappeared. Travel became rare. Those who stayed inside felt no need to leave. The world narrowed to familiar spaces. The hearth, the table, the quiet room. Night arrived early. Wrapped in white. Moonlight reflected softly off the snow, casting a gentle glow through the darkness. Shadows moved slowly, stretching and fading. Inside, blankets were pulled tighter. Bodies rested closer together. Breathing found a calm rhythm. The snow outside made no sound. It simply rested, layer upon layer. And within that stillness, sleep came more easily. Thought slowed. Awareness softened. The village, covered and protected by snow, slipped into a deeper quiet, held gently by the long medieval winter. At the center of the village stood the church. It had been there longer than anyone could remember. Its stone walls were thick and weathered, marked by time, by seasons, by countless winters like this one. During the colder months, the church did not draw crowds. There were no grand gatherings, no loud voices. Instead, it offered quiet. People came slowly, one or two at a time, their footsteps soft against the snow-covered ground. They pushed open the heavy wooden door and stepped inside, leaving the cold behind. The air within was cool, but still. It smelled faintly of stone, wax, and old wood. Candles flickered gently, their light barely moving. The space felt calm, unchanging. Benches lined the room, simple and worn smooth. People sat without hurry, hands folded, breathing slow and steady. There was no need for many words. Faith, in winter, was quiet. Prayers were spoken softly, sometimes only in thought. They were not long or complex. They asked for warmth, for patience, for endurance. The church did not promise comfort, but it offered steadiness. The stone walls held the silence well. Sounds faded quickly here. Even footsteps seemed to disappear. For a moment, time felt suspended. Candles burned slowly, their flames steady and small. Wax dripped in thin lines, marking time without urgency. People sat and rested their thoughts. They let worries loosen. They let the outside world fade. Winter pressed against the church walls, but it could not enter. After a while, one by one, people rose and left quietly. No one lingered at the door. No one rushed away. Outside, the snow waited. The village remained hushed. The church returned to stillness, its candles continuing to burn, untroubled. Even those who did not enter felt its presence. It stood as a reminder that winter was not faced alone, that endurance was shared. As night returned, the church bell rang once. Low and slow. Its sound traveled gently through the cold air, not calling, only marking the hour. Inside their homes, people heard it faintly. They paused for a moment, then returned to their quiet routines. The fire crackled softly. Breathing slowed. Eyes grew heavy. The long winter night settled once more, and the village rested, held by stone, by flame, and by quiet faith. As winter continued, time began to lose its edges. Days no longer felt separate from one another. Morning blended into afternoon, afternoon into evening, evening into night. The village moved within this quiet blur, unconcerned with counting. There were no dates to remember, no milestones to reach. Only the steady passing of moments. Snow remained on the ground, unchanged, as if holding everything in place. Inside the homes, routines repeated gently. The same fire was lit, the same meals were prepared, the same quiet tasks returned, day after day. This repetition brought comfort. Without urgency, the mind relaxed. People stopped wondering what day it was. They stopped anticipating change. They lived within the present moment, soft and unhurried. Sometimes, someone would pause mid-task, hands resting still, eyes unfocused. Thoughts drifted without direction. Memories rose and faded. Plans dissolved before forming. The world asked nothing more. Outside, the landscape barely shifted. Snow reflected light evenly, making the sky and ground feel connected. The sun appeared briefly each day, low and pale, then disappeared again. No one rushed to follow it. There was nowhere to go. Inside. Warmth remained constant. The fire burned with familiar patience. Its presence marked time better than any clock. Crackling meant now. Embers meant later. Breathing slowed naturally. Bodies followed the rhythm of the room. Sleep arrived easily at any hour. A short rest near the fire. A longer one beneath blankets. Waking felt gentle. No sharp transitions. Just a gradual return to awareness. Conversations became rare. Words felt unnecessary. Silence filled the spaces comfortably. Never heavy, never empty. Children adapted easily. They rested when tired, watched when awake, asked few questions. Adults did the same. Winter had softened expectations. It allowed people to simply be. The absence of movement created clarity. Not sharp clarity, but a calm understanding. This was the season of waiting. Not waiting for something specific, but waiting itself. And within that waiting, time loosened its grip. The village existed in a long pause, held gently between past and future. Nothing was lost here. Nothing was rushed. Only the present remained quiet, steady, and unchanging. As another night settled in, and the fire glowed low, time drifted once more into stillness, and the long medieval winter continued, unmeasured, unhurried, and calm. Winter did not test the village with sudden challenges. It tested them with time. Day after day, the cold remained. The snow stayed. The quiet continued. And within that constancy, a quiet strength emerged. Endurance did not appear as effort. It showed itself in small choices. In rising slowly, in tending the fire once more, in repeating the same gentle routines. No one spoke of strength. There was no need to. It lived in the way people conserved energy, in the way they moved carefully, never wasting warmth or motion. Clothing was layered with intention. Hands were protected. Bodies were listened to. Rest was taken without guilt. Work was done without strain. This balance was learned over many winters. Inside the homes, patience settled deeply. Waiting became natural. Waiting for the fire to warm the room. Waiting for soup to simmer. Waiting for daylight to fade. Nothing was forced. Even thoughts slowed to match the season. Worries, when they appeared, were acknowledged quietly, then set aside. There was little benefit in rushing ahead mentally when the body remained still. The winter taught this lesson gently. Outside, the village stood unchanged. Snow held everything in place, protecting the ground beneath. Trees rested. Fields slept. Inside, people mirrored that rest. Breathing remained steady. Movements were minimal. Strength was found not in action, but in restraint. In knowing when to stop. In knowing when to wait. The long nights no longer felt heavy. They felt familiar. Darkness became a companion, not something to resist. The fire glowed softly, its warmth constant and reassuring. Time continued to pass, but without pressure. Each day added quietly to the next, forming a continuous stretch of endurance. And within that stretch, there was calm. The village did not conquer winter. It lived alongside it. And in doing so, found a steady rhythm that carried them forward. One slow, patient day at a time. Change did not announce itself. It never did. It arrived quietly, almost unnoticed, hidden beneath the long winter. The snow still covered the village. The cold remained. Nothing looked different at first glance, but small signs began to appear. The light lingered a moment, longer in the afternoon. Just enough to be felt, not enough to be named. A thin warmth touched the air on certain days. So faint it could be missed if one was not paying attention. Inside the homes, people noticed without speaking of it. The fire seemed to burn differently, as if the room warmed a little faster. Breaths did not cloud quite as thickly near the hearth. Outside, snow softened at the edges. It no longer held its sharp shape everywhere. Footprints lasted slightly longer before fading. From time to time, a drip of water was heard, slow and steady, falling from the edge of a roof. No one rushed to greet these changes. There was no excitement. Winter was still present. It still held the village firmly, but something beneath it had begun to shift. Animals sensed it first. They moved a little more within their shelters. They lifted their heads, listening to sounds not yet clear. Inside, routines remained unchanged. Meals were prepared the same way. Fires were tended with the same care. There was comfort in continuing as before, even hope. When it came, was quiet. It did not push forward. It waited patiently. The village had learned not to hurry the seasons. They arrived when ready. As night fell, the darkness felt less heavy. Stars seemed sharper against the sky. The moon reflected gently off the snow. Sleep remained easy. Deep, unbroken. Dreams, when they came, were soft and slow, like distant memories. The long winter was not over, but it had begun to loosen its hold. And in that gentle shift, there was reassurance. The village rested on, held between what had been and what would come next, without needing to wait. Winter did not end with a moment. There was no clear line, no sudden change. It simply began to loosen, quietly. Snow still rested across the village, but it no longer felt heavy. Its presence softened, as if it was slowly letting go. Days grew slightly brighter. Not enough to notice at first, but enough to feel. The light lingered a little longer on the walls. Shadows moved more slowly in the evenings. Darkness arrived without the same weight. Inside the homes, life continued as it always had. Fires were lit. Meals were prepared. Quiet routines remained unchanged. No one spoke of winter ending. There was no need. The season did not require acknowledgement. It asked only for patience until it was done. Outside, small sounds returned. A faint drip from melting snow. A distant movement beneath the ice. Nothing loud. Nothing sudden. The village did not rush to respond. Paths remained mostly covered. Doors stayed closed against the cold. Warm clothing was still worn. There was wisdom in waiting. Animals grew more restless. Stretching, shifting, testing the stillness. Trees remained bare, but their branches felt less rigid, less locked in place. Inside, breathing felt easier. The air moved more freely. The fire seemed to warm the room more quickly. Sleep remained deep, comfortable, uninterrupted. Dreams, when they came, felt lighter, as if the mind itself sensed the change. Evenings felt different now. Not brighter, just softer. Candles burned a little longer. The glow felt gentler. Time, which had stretched and blurred, began to flow again, slowly, naturally. Winter did not leave behind celebration. It left behind calm. It stepped back the same way it arrived, without drawing attention. And the village remained, steady and patient, resting within the quiet that followed. When the winter was finally behind them, it did not linger loudly in memory. It remained as a feeling, soft and distant, like a long, quiet dream. The village looked much the same. The homes still stood. The paths slowly reappeared, but something subtle had changed. Those who had lived through the long winter carried it within them, not as hardship, but as calm. They remembered the stillness, the slow days, the warmth of firelight against cold walls. They remembered how time had stretched, how life had grown smaller, and how that smallness had felt safe. Winter had asked them to wait, and they had learned how. They remembered evenings spent in quiet rooms, the sound of breath nearby, the comfort of shared silence. They remembered simple meals, simple routines, simple days. And in remembering, they did not feel loss. They felt steadiness. The long winter had passed, but its rhythm remained, in slower movements, in gentler thoughts, in an understanding that not everything needs to hurry. The village continued forward, as it always had, but somewhere beneath the surface, the patience of winter stayed, and as night settled once more, soft and familiar, the memory of that season rested quietly, like embers beneath ash. Warm, steady, and calm, the story did not end. It simply became still, and in that stillness, rest came easily.